Hi, Aïssatou. We're so excited to have you on the podcast.
Hi.
We're going to talk about something that a lot of people have told us they want to hear about, which is as the first hire of a procurement function, what are the challenges, in particular in the tech ecosystem? How do you think about building that function as a procurement professional? And how do you think about the right time to make that hire as a CFO or finance function in the ecosystem? And we're super lucky because we're interviewing Aïssatou, who's been building the procurement function at Qonto from zero, from scratch, and has been there for about a year. Welcome, Aïssatou.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for joining. First of all, tell us more about you. Who are you, and what did you do before you joined Qonto?
So I actually started my career in procurement. I only did procurement since I started to work, actually. I started in the automotive industry as a apprentice, actually. I was
Good
buying
school.
yeah, very old school, but it's the good school. It's the perfect
Yeah.
school to learn procurement. So I joined as a trainee for 2 years. And I was buying a steering system, mostly doing continuous improvement with suppliers. Then I actually continued in this company for 1 year. After that, I wanted to go abroad, having an experience in another country. So I went to Denmark for another company in the railway this time, and I joined as an indirect buyer. So
Awesome.
it was another scope, another part of procurement. So this is where I actually started to negotiate tech tools, softwares, etc. So it was a first step to tech procurement. After that, I came back to France and I joined Le Bon Coin, which is actually owned by Adevinta. I joined as a buyer in order to negotiate communication and marketing services mostly. But after some months, I actually started to negotiate product and tech. And at some point, I step up in a procurement manager role for customer services. And at the same time, actually, I wanted to have to go back to a more generalistic position. And this is when actually Qonto contacted me to build the procurement function from scratch, addressing
Wow.
all
Amazing.
communities possible. So yeah, I joined Qonto in July 23.
Amazing. I remember meeting you, I think your first week, and you're kind of discovering everything. It was really cool, but we're going to talk about this. Tell us a little bit more about Qonto. What's the company like, in particular for our international listeners? What does it do, and how big is it?
In short, it's an online business account that combines invoicing, bookkeeping, and spend management tools. It operates in 4 markets: France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. I forgot to say, but it was created by Alex and Steve in 2016.
Who we
And
admire. As entrepreneurs, we admire them.
yeah, I understand. Yeah, now we are actually 1,600 employees. So it's quite significant. I think in 2019 they were like 500, so it's a huge jump.
Yeah.
When I joined, we were like 1,400.
Yeah, so quite a sharp sort of growth. But it's interesting because they hired you after 1,000.
Yes, exactly.
Which is interesting because we see a lot of teams that are smaller than that. They get started. So it's interesting. And maybe we'll go into before you, who was kind of doing what procurement normally does. In terms of what you do at Qonto, can you just tell us a little bit more what you were hired to do, and then sort of what do you do now 1 year later?
Yeah. I was hired to cover the sourcing part of procurement. At the time, actually, they just implemented a P2P tool, and I was there to fill the gap for sourcing, supporting Qontoers in their negotiation, finding some areas of optimization in our spend. But now, 6 months after joining Qonto, I actually took a lead position. So now I am addressing the whole
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I am addressing the whole procurement scope, so from sourcing to payment. Basically, I am addressing the sourcing part. I have one direct report for the P2P part. I'm supported on the negotiation part, and especially on SaaS by a SaaS management solution.
Super clear. In terms of what we're going to see today is we're going to see when it's the right time for companies to make their first procurement hire, how to build as the first procurement hire in the company, your first 90 days in order to kind of have a framework to guarantee success. We're going to see in particular what data and information together and how to do that efficiently. And then how to prioritize your first procurement bets, who to work with, how to choose that in order to maximize evangelization of the procurement function. And then we'll kind of take a bit of a step back and see what is a reasonable goal in terms of expectations to set for achievements in year 1 and in year 2. And then we'll go into who are the people to collaborate with and the relationships to build within the company, both in terms of buyers within the company, but also sort of functional stakeholders. Does that work?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So first of all, tell us more about your role at Qonto, how it's set up, and who it reports to.
So I am reporting to the director of FP&A, Nathalie. My scope goes from sourcing to pay. So it's basically negotiation and the administrative part of procurement, which is the P2P, procure to pay.
We see two different kinds of procurement. We see some procurement teams reporting into operations, and we see some procurement teams reporting into finance. Why do you think the choice was made for it to be in finance at Qonto?
I think it's mostly because of one of Qonto's objectives. One of Qonto's objectives is to pave the way toward profitability. So it totally makes sense that procurement is actually reporting to finance.
Into finance. It's one lever for profitability. Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of when you joined, what do you think the expectations were from the people who hired you for this first sort of procurement role? What did they expect, you think?
I think what they expected is that I contribute to the company objectives. As you know, procurement is directly contributing to the P&L. So the idea was to assess the current state of procurement at Qonto and suggest a roadmap in order to optimize the cost, finding some way to drive the cost down with supplier mainly.
So it was kind of this moment where it was time to look at the cost.
Yeah,
Companies
exactly.
grown tremendously, and it's kind of time to look at the cost and to
Exactly.
navigate towards profitability.
Yeah, and also because, of course, when the company is growing, the spend is growing proportionally.
Yeah.
So it was time to have someone controlling this spend.
And one thing that's very interesting in the case of Qonto is, and you were telling me about this, is they actually rolled out a full-on P2P before having their first procurement hire. And we can debate sort of whether it's a good idea or not. That's very atypical. Do you have any sort of explanation of why that was the case?
I think the main reason why they implemented the P2P is to have visibility on the spend, visibility on who is spending, and being able to do first line controls on the finance side.
To put a policy, and then it ended into you because it's actually your job. It's more complicated than people
exactly.
think. Makes sense. I'm curious from your perspective. Before you joined, what did you expect to find there on day one? Like, you're the first hire in a tech company. It's quite big, quite large by the time you're joining. You've gone to tech companies before, but what did you expect?
Actually, I was not expecting a lot because I'm in the procurement network since quite a time now, and I know what you could expect when you are the first procurement hire.
Not much.
Not much. I know that there were potentially a lot of change to handle, some adoption to find, and this is basically what I was expecting from the
function. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you organize your first 90 days? So you get there, it's kind of, I guess, like you expected, the information's kind of all over the place. How did you build your first 90-day plan? How did you think about that? And maybe what did you want to accomplish in your first 90 days?
What I wanted to accomplish after the first 90 days was my goal was to be able to deliver a roadmap for the next year, a procurement roadmap. So I did actually 3 things. The first thing is to analyze the spend, not only the spend, but also the processes in order to find some optimization and to see how we can be more efficient. So I start what we call a spend cube. I think my peers in procurement will...
Yeah, there's quite a few people that have explained the spend cube on this podcast. All goes back to Eric Bourgeois.
Yeah. So I started a spend cube in order to be able to see how much we are spending, with which supplier, who are the main requester, and actually for which period. So this was actually my first task. Then, of course, I met people, not only top management, but also main requesters, but also key stakeholders such as legal, such as a risk team, for example, and also trying to do the marketing of the procurement function, trying to make them understand the value of procurement, what I can bring to their team. And of course, the third point was to understand the business, the objectives, in order to deliver a roadmap that is aligned with those corporate objectives.
Yeah, makes total sense. And on the business goals, what did you find out? What are the sort of business objectives at Qonto that you found?
Basically, as I said earlier, there are two main objectives. Of course, having a 1 million customer by mid-2025. If we go on the operation, the two objectives are to pave the way to profitability and to be more efficient in our processes.
So you basically found a company that's perfect for procurement, because that's
Yeah.
exactly what it delivers.
Yeah, actually.
That's awesome. In terms of, if we go back to sort of your first point of basically building your spend cube, what a lot of people are telling us is, you're in a high growth company. There's no existing procurement function. So most likely you've got data kind of all over the place. All of it is with different angles of interpretation that is not procurement. So a lot of accounting data, a lot of, kind of budgeting data for FP&A, but maybe not a proper sort of ready data set to build your spend cube. How did you do this? And sort of give us a sense of how much time it took you to gather a data set that you could trust in order to build your roadmap with?
It's a very good question, actually, but I am lucky there because I had the opportunity to do this exercise in my previous company with a consulting company. So I knew exactly where to go. I knew that the single point of truth for supplier data was the ERP. I knew that the ERP owner was the accounting team. So I went directly to the accounting team asking for extract, basically. It doesn't took me a lot of time.
Yeah.
Actually,
well, and were the extracts kind of like, was the data good straight away, or was there a lot of back and forth?
Yeah. Of course not. I had to enrich it with information in order to be able to show what I mentioned earlier, how much we spend, who are we spending with. So I enriched it with the requesters, the CC owner, the cost center owner, to be clearer. I enriched it with the categories, the commodities hierarchy, or taxonomy, as we call it in the business, in order to show those four aspects of the spend cubes. What are we spending, when, who is spending, and how much.
So basically, you took the raw sort of journal entries from the ERP, from the accounting, and then you kind of enriched it with sort of, I guess, a lot of sort of VLOOKUPs.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, it was very manual. A lot of Google Sheet open in my computer. I was a bit confused at the beginning, but yeah. And then I had a proper database with all information needed to build the spend cube.
So you've got your data set. You kind of, it's not perfect because you've got booked data, so you've got accounting data. You don't have engagement data at this point, but that's okay to make those decisions. And then once you have that, what was sort of the prioritization framework that you did? I mean, we had Kevin and Remy from Schwal and Miracle who told us about the Krajic matrix, kind of see what you need and prioritize who to talk to. What was your approach to using that data set in the real world?
Yeah, that's a very good question as well. To be honest, I didn't directly use the Krajic matrix. Why? Because it's very time consuming when you have to do it manually. You can decide to do it on like a batch of supplier, like the 100 top supplier. But to be honest, it was not applicable for me, for Qonto Spend. So what I decided to do is to use the Pareto methodology. And I realized that it was quite aligned with our spend. And it allows me to identify the top suppliers
Yeah.
and to build my roadmap based on those outputs. Actually.
For our listeners who don't know the Pareto methodology, do you wanna sort of explain what it means?
Yeah, it's basically to identify what are your main supplier, and basically it's 20% of your supplier covering 80% of your spend.
So it's like they're like the most important
The most
um,
important one.
people. So
Yeah.
now you've got your top suppliers. What do you do next?
What I do next is I go back to the business. Even if I got already have input on their relationship with their provider, I try to come up with strategy in order to optimize the cost with the supplier, and I define a detailed roadmap with project that we could implement in order to negotiate with the supplier.
So you basically have this list of top suppliers. You look at the requesters that are kind of next. You know, you've got your 20%. How do you choose sort of within the 20%, the first project that you decide to work on? Which one, you know, don't necessarily tell us exactly, but which type of project it was and why did you choose that one?
I decided to focus my first project on SaaS because, not thanks to the Pareto, but through other methodology, I realized that we are spending a lot on SaaS. It is like 10% of our spend, which is a lot. So I decided to do a project in order to optimize the SaaS and drive the cost down with supplier through negotiation and actually bring value to the business. In the same time as that, my first negotiation when I arrived at Qonto was with a SaaS provider, and I got really good feedback from my IT team, from the CTO. So I kind of had already the approbation from the CTO. So I took this opportunity in order to get sponsorship from him, from the IT director, to actually to lead this project and deliver quick wins and savings on this
This is
category.
super interesting because, you know, there's sort of like the university approach of you go, you do your spend cube and you do your matrix and you prioritize. And then there's the real world, which is
Yeah.
you meet this guy, you know, who is important in the company and you got some wins early on. And sort of it makes sense. It's 10% of the company spend, and so it makes sense to sort of double down on this. And I think that's sort of a valuable lesson, which is you do the work, but there's also reality when you come into those high growth companies. Can you tell us a little bit more about, you know, that and how it plays out in real life?
Yes. So basically, the strategy I implemented is procurement. Myself focusing on top SaaS supplier and delegate the long tail to a SaaS management tool, because at this time I had resources challenges. I was not able to delegate negotiation internally because I didn't have any resources in my team. So I had to find a way to address this scope, because I think SaaS is used by actually everyone in the company. So it's a good way to be visible in front of requesters.
In front of a lot of people,
Yeah.
straight away. Makes total sense. What happened? What was the result?
So first quarter, we got a good result. We are on track. I'm actually quite confident that we will reach the objectives.
The objective.
Of
That's
course,
awesome.
we had some challenges because there is an external party in the project. So of course, you have to accommodate, find a way of working, etc. But yeah, I'm confident.
And so if you think about sort of that first project, it was kind of designed to be the first big hit in a way. You know, if we take the music industry, did it work as a first hit? And did it open the doors for you to build the brand of procurement within the company? And maybe sort of how did it help you build that?
It definitely helped getting the tech team on board. The tech team is actually a scope that procurement is addressing at at least 90%. It's
Okay.
the only scope that we are addressing at 90%. So of course it helps. And I think what helped is the fact that we had sponsorship, we had a good strategy, and we communicated the wins.
Yeah, and that makes all the difference is having the strong sponsors. Sometimes it's not the biggest item, but like the sponsors is also a very important dynamic. And sometimes in the biggest item, you don't yet have the sponsor.
Yeah.
In terms of if you sort of, look back on your first year and building that function for the company, what are you, and I'm going to ask you a few questions, what are you the most proud of?
Good question. What I am proud of is that I'm quite a proactive person. Trying to be a problem solver, working with what I have in hands. Because I think that the procurement should help optimizing the cost, not adding extra cost. So yeah, I think the big win is to be able to play with what I had in hands.
So basically, kind of like you had very limited resources and you had to be super focused and laser sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. In terms of, looking at the things, not necessarily that went bad or, that were failures in any way, but more, what is the advice? What do you wish you had known a year ago? And what's the advice you would give to your 1 year ago self?
If I had to give an advice to myself, it will be don't start a project without having a sponsor. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
You will not have the impact expected. It will not be visible. It's not worth it. Always have a sponsor. And when you deliver a project with a sponsor, communicate your wins. You have to do it the proper way. Communicate it in the proper communication channel to the right person, etc. But communicate your wins.
So
Even
that
the
the
small
impact.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically it's very interesting because both of the things you're saying is be impact driven. You're not going to have an impact without a sponsor.
Yeah.
And when you do get results, half of the impact is also communicating so that the brand of procurement gets it.
Exactly. It's branding.
It's branding. Yeah, it's super interesting. In terms of building sponsors, I think a lot of people, when they're building that procurement function for the first time, a lot of people don't realize how important sponsorship is. And sometimes, the stars align and you just get it from the get-go, but it's like you shouldn't count on this. Do you have sort of advice for anyone who's kind of thinking about this and thinking, okay, I need to find sponsors for these projects? What advice can you give them?
I think the advice I would give is to send this Slack, ask for a coffee. People like when you are bringing value to them. Even the C-level, they always have 5 minutes to give you in order to explain how you can bring value to their team, how they can focus on core tasks instead of negotiation with suppliers, how you can bring value. Don't be afraid of asking for a coffee, a 5-minute coffee.
It's sometimes it's the simple stuff that helps.
It's totally okay.
And in terms of being sort of the first procurement person in a tech company, I always kind of imagine or think about myself having only worked in tech companies, but not big enough to have procurement people. So I always think about myself as my job is hard enough. Like, don't add me another procurement, legal, whatever these people. I don't know these people. They're like the boring people. Don't add me that. Did you experience any of this when you joined? Or were people kind of, now it's your job. You go, you do this.
Of course, there are a few people, but it's not the majority. I always say that when I go to people and I told them that I will lead the negotiation, I can see a release in their face because it's not their job to negotiate and they don't want to negotiate. So it's quite kind of a release for them, having someone who will lead the negotiation, who will be the bad cop. I don't like this word, but
And you know what? I was an operator before, and I think I can completely relate with what you're saying, which is you get to a stage where the company's spending, some of those contracts are like hundreds of thousands or millions, and you're kind of like, I need to make the call. I'm not qualified to make the call. So like having,
Exactly.
so like having someone like you come in, you're like, yeah, you take the call.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, this
Um,
is it. Because I think it's also another advice I can give is to be confident. Like it's okay not knowing everything.
yeah.
Having to negotiate is not only asking for a lower pricing, it's also understanding the pricing model, and you have to be confident enough to go to the supplier asking for specific information, more detail, asking question. Yeah, it's a mindset.
How did you approach the collaboration with the different functions? Because, one of the things that I find very interesting is procurement is like the front door to the requester, but in order to do its job, procurement needs a lot of different people to do their job. You need legal, to review sort of timely. You need accounting to not make, requesters' life awful. You need compliance, CSR, all these function to do their job. They don't know all these people. They just know all these people are involved in buying, but like they blame you. If it's slow, it's kind of you.
Yeah.
So how did you navigate building those relationships?
So what I did first is to meet those people. I can take the example of legal. We have the same interest. The idea was to meet them and make them understand that our common goal is to mitigate risk, be a business partner for internal requester, and that we could collaborate with each other in order to cover the more topics possible. Because as you know, one of the struggle of procurement, but it's also a struggle that we are sharing with legal, is that sometimes we are involved in the topic a bit too late. So at least by having a collaboration with legal, we can reduce those type of situation,
Yeah.
because either it's legal or procurement involved in the topic,
And you can
so we
share the
can
information.
communicate with each other. So this is what I actually try to actually discuss about with legal, and we were sharing the same vision. So it was quite easy to work together. We, of course, also implemented rituals in order to discuss about our common negotiation, common discussion. For some categories, we are actually going in negotiation together. We are negotiating in duo. So yeah, I think it's a collaborative mindset that you should have when you are like.
Another relationship that's very important in companies is procurement and accounting. How did you go about this one?
This is a very good question as well. So I did actually the same methodology, meeting them. It was actually one of the first things I met when I arrived, because we are part of the same team, the finance team. So it was quite logical that I had a first meeting with them. So we discussed about the tool. They were the one using the tool internally outside of finance operation. They were the one using the P2P tool. So we shared challenges, how we can work together. We implemented rituals. We implemented communication channels on Slack, for example, in order to communicate some blockers and work together in order to solve them. So yeah, accounting, it was actually one of the first team I started to work with when I arrived.
Yeah, it's super important, and they end up being the biggest. It's always the case users of the P2P.
Yeah,
And sometimes like, when that relationship isn't good between procurement and accounting, it's a disaster.
I agree.
So it's an important one. Obviously there are other teams like, compliance, CSR, but I imagine that these come in a little bit later when you have
Yeah.
more maturity in your procurement process.
Yes,
Yeah.
risk team, we are working with them currently to improve the coverage of risk assessment, for
Yeah.
example.
Which
So
is important in your business as
yeah,
a sort of banking
yeah.
license.
When I arrived, they were a risk assessment process for critical suppliers, the one related to our position as a payment institution, but we don't have a proper risk assessment for other suppliers. So this is an ongoing discussion. ESG, this is a function that started after procurement. They arrived actually quite recently, the lead and the manager of this team. So we are building a relationship together
Yeah.
in order.
Yeah, that's another very, I think it's a very sort of important one as well, because
Yeah,
procurement is a big lever for impact.
exactly. And we can help discussing with the supplier, getting them on board on the sustainability aspect, because most of the time we are the first interlocutor of the supplier, so we can help. We can help also on our P2P tool, as you
Yeah,
know. So yeah, definitely, this is a conversation that is important.
absolutely. I have one last question for you, which is sort of like, the hype question. As a procurement professional, building a procurement function in a fairly sort of constrained resource environment, because you're not going to build an army of buyers,
Yeah, it
at
doesn't.
least not in the short term. How do you think about AI creating value, for procurement directors like you to build more efficient organizations? And it can be AI within the tool, but it can be also other
Mm.
stuff, other applications.
To be honest, I'm a big fan of AI.
Me too.
I don't know if I have a right definition of AI because I'm not technical, but at least I'm using ChatGPT a lot and I can see the value.
You know what? It's become my latest interview question when I interview new hires. Maybe I shouldn't say that
Yeah.
publicly, but when I interview new hires, one of my first question is, "What's the last thing you asked ChatGPT, and when was it?"
Ah,
And it's very interesting.
yeah, I think it's such a powerful tool for productivity.
Absolutely.
Yesterday, I think to build an RFI or RFP, I was taking 1 week, 10 days. Now I can build an RFI or RFP in 1 day.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a productivity win. So I think what I advise to procurement person is to get
On the train.
use use AI. It's very nice also to understand a product from a supplier. It's very interesting. On the P2P tool, there are, I think, a lot of things that we can do.
Absolutely.
Implement chatbot in order to have a better experience in the tool, reduce the request to procurement, allow people to do self-buying because they have the AI chatbot, so they don't need to involve procurement. Yeah, there are a lot of opportunity with
It's
AI that we
it's
should
interesting what you just said. Like, it's almost like you said, use AI to do your job better. Like, if you're writing an email, or if you're like, you gave the example of an RFI, like, or RFP, but like, this used to take weeks, really doesn't need to. You just
no, it
ask,
doesn't.
ChatGPT to build one for you. So those are like how to do my job 10x. And
Yeah,
then the P2P tool, I think, has a big responsibility in making AI available, not so much maybe for you, but also for the requester,
for the
so that
requester.
they, so that the AI takes a lot of the workload
Yeah,
of hand holding them. And then the
exactly.
last thing you said, which I think is super interesting, was on the long tail spend, kind of like have the AI within the tool coach your requesters to kind of have a mock negotiation,
Yeah,
or
with good practices. Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah,
And sort of like, you can imagine a world, and we were just talking about this with the team, where, you know, automatically the tool asks for a discount, and,
yeah.
it's not going to work every time, but like,
Mm,
it's bound to work at least, 20% of the time. Um,
mm,
but it forces everybody to get into a negotiation.
yeah,
So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that.
yeah. I think it will make people more comfortable going
Exactly.
in a low value negotiation
Exactly. And so it means that you guys as a function can focus on the sort of
on the
high
top.
impact,
Yeah,
but without sort of ignoring the bottom,
exactly.
which
Yeah,
can become a very quite big ticket amount,
at some point.
but
Yeah,
super fragmented.
yeah. I totally agree with you.
It's,
Definitely.
you know what? It's going to be an exciting next couple of years, as
Yeah,
I think both we operate differently as companies, because every person is just way more impactful.
mm,
And also, as the applications of AI within software become much more interesting and advanced. I think we're just at the beginning of this.
Yeah, I completely agree.
It's going to be exciting. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited to share this with you and sort of check in regularly and have you come back in a few months and see, you know, if what we predicted happened.
It's funny that you are saying a few months because it shows that it's going very fast actually.
I think it's a few months. I think in a few months we'll have a super different perspective. It's
totally.
It's going to be interesting. Aïssatou, thank you so much for joining. It's been an absolute joy, as always, learning from you. And I'm excited to watch you build a sort of next gen procurement function at Qonto. I'm kind of blown away with what you've done in only a year, and can't wait to see you do that over the next whatever years you spend.
Thank you very much.
Talk later.
Thank you.